My name is Emily Carter, and up until 2 years ago, I believed I had the perfect life. My husband, Daniel, was an attorney in Atlanta. Sharp, thoughtful, dependable. I worked part time as a school counselor and spent the rest of my time running our home, volunteering at the local food bank, and being what I thought was a model wife. We lived in a charming 2-story home in the Virginia Highland neighborhood. Daniel and I had been married for 8 years. Quietly, peacefully. We didn't fight much. We didn't have children, not by choice, but due to timing and circumstances that never quite aligned. I sometimes thought our marriage lacked spark, but it was comfortable, safe. Everything changed when Jeremy showed up. Jeremy Adams had been Daniel's best friend since college. They'd gone to Emory together, pledged the same fraternity, even started a podcast about legal news that had gotten modest traction online. But then Jeremy moved out west to pursue business in tech, and Daniel stayed in Atlanta. They kept in touch, but it wasn't until Jeremy decided to relocate back east that the two reconnected in a more present way. The first time I met Jeremy was at a backyard barbecue Daniel threw to welcome him back. He had the kind of charisma that could take over a room without trying. Tall, sun-kissed from California, with a smooth, affable tone that made you feel like you were the only person he cared to talk to. I remember thinking, wow, this is who Daniel's always talking about. I expected a finance bro in loafers. Instead, he was thoughtful, a bit too observant, and had the kind of calm energy that unsettled me in a way I didn't yet understand. As the weeks passed, Jeremy became a regular fixture at our home. At first, it was dinners, then game nights, then the three of us watching movies on the couch. He'd stay late sometimes, and I'd find myself glancing at the clock, wondering when he'd leave. Not because I didn't like him, but because I realized I was starting to think about him more than I should. It wasn't romantic at first. It was emotional. The kind that sneaks up on you, like soft waves pulling sand from beneath your feet. He remembered little things I said, stories I told once while cooking or passing through the hallway. He asked questions about my job, my passions, even my childhood. Things Daniel rarely did anymore. It wasn't that Daniel didn't care. It's that after 8 years, he assumed he already knew everything he needed to. One night in mid-November, Daniel was on a business trip in Chicago. A late flight, a long case. I was at home nursing a bad cold when Jeremy dropped by unannounced with Thai food and lemon tea. I figured you wouldn't have cooked, he said, casually holding up the bag. I almost told him to leave, but I didn't. That night, nothing happened, nothing physical. We ate, we talked, and I fell asleep halfway through an old movie. But when I woke up, there was a blanket on me. Jeremy had already gone. And I couldn't stop thinking about that. I felt guilty. Ashamed even. I kept trying to replay the evening and tell myself it was just a kind gesture from a friend. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. It wasn't about what he did. It was about how I felt. How I wanted to feel that safe more often. How I realized Daniel hadn't wrapped a blanket around me in years. For weeks, I tried to pull away. I made excuses when Jeremy came by. I declined dinners, left rooms, took long walks just to avoid eye contact. I was punishing myself for something that hadn't even happened, but could. And then, something unexpected happened. Daniel changed. He started coming home earlier. He surprised me with flowers one Tuesday. He made reservations at a restaurant we hadn't visited in years. I should have been overjoyed. I should have leaned into him and told him everything I'd been feeling. But instead, I asked, "Why now?" And he said something I'll never forget. "Jeremy told me you've been quiet lately, distant. He said I should pay more attention." I blinked, swallowed, nodded. In that moment, I felt two things: betrayal and relief. Jeremy had seen me, yes. But he'd also done the one thing I didn't expect. He handed me back to Daniel. Slowly, painfully, I began to heal. Daniel and I talked, really talked, for the first time in years. I told him I felt like a background character in our own story. He cried. Said he didn't know how disconnected I felt. Said he'd been coasting. So had I. We went to therapy. We carved out time for each other. We learned to ask each other real questions again. And Jeremy? He pulled away. Quietly, respectfully. He moved to a different part of the city, focused on his startup, and faded from our daily lives. Not out of spite, but because he knew he couldn't stay. It's been almost a year now. Daniel and I aren't perfect. We still argue, still forget things, still go to bed angry sometimes. But there is a presence to our love now, a tenderness that wasn't there before. Not because of Jeremy, but because of what his presence revealed. Sometimes it takes a third party to show you what's missing. And sometimes what feels like temptation is actually a mirror, reflecting back the parts of yourself you've hidden for too long. I was a good wife. Then I almost lost my way. But sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones where nothing scandalous happens, just a slow unraveling and a careful stitching back together.